Get it. That's what's fascinating to me about this story is I'm talking about media, fans, national media. Everybody alike is in the same boat. Nobody gets it. Nobody understands it. And I'll be completely honest, I cannot recall a similar situation where nobody can come up with a theory that fits all the facts. It's really strange.
Well, what if he's not smart enough to learn the playbook? What if he doesn't understand
He started for 4 years in the SEC.
Yeah, but they're more looking at the sideline.
I know it's spread. I get all that. Brandon Allen started for 3 years in the SEC. Does he get it for so much more? I mean, it doesn't work like that for me. Could he be slow picking up the playbook? Yeah, I guess. But it doesn't feel like that's the problem. Again, you have 3 quarterbacks available, none of which have thrown a pass in the NFL or even taken a snap. And the guy that you picked in the second round is the one you leave out? It's weird. The Denver Nuggets dropped their first game of the year tonight. Disappointing performance. Something that if you'd watched their previous 2 wins, kind of seemed like it was due. We'll talk about the fallout with Nuggets insider Matt Moore next. Denver Nuggets fall tonight 109-106 at home to the Dallas Mavericks. They had not shot well in recent games. Both of them were wins. This game, they actually did shoot well, 47.3 from the field. Now the Mavericks shot a little bit better. Nuggets defense let them down a little bit. And the Nuggets were not very good at the free throw line. Neither was Dallas. Dallas shot a horrific 58.3. Had they been any better, this game might have been uglier. Nuggets just did not get it done at home in a game they probably should have. Nikola Jokic gets a triple-double in the minimal possible way of doing it. 10 points, 10 assists, 10 boards. Also had 3 steals. Jamal Murray went 7 for 13 from the field, was forcing shots late. One of the biggest concerns watching the game here in the studio, with Kevin Kistner in the booth and Kyle Berry, who's producing Cecil Lammy's show. All three of us were watching the television and saying that this is a spot where we think that Murray is going to probably rush. And he did try to push it. He did try to make those kind of mistakes. Not trying to make the mistakes, but made the mistakes of trying to be too aggressive, finding the open man. And there you go. He misses that. It's not all on Murray by any stretch, but the Nuggets do fall. And it's a frustrating loss because it feels like the left one on the table. At the same time, the Nuggets are 3-1. Want to go to our Nuggets insider, Matt Moore, courtesy of Budweiser. And Matt, looking at this game, we've been talking about the poor shooting the Nuggets have had in their last 2 wins. Tonight, the shooting was there, but it was the defense that wasn't, allowing the Mavericks to shoot almost 50% from the field.
Yeah, and the bench going off like that is at once an outlier and two kind of indicative of what we talked about last night, right?
Right.
Back to back, you worry about the energy, and you're worried about the guards being able to create out of the pick and roll. The hedge was good, but they were getting really good cross-court passes on reversals to find open shooters, and the breakdowns are really coming. Michael Malone singled out some situations. They tried to switch more tonight, and this is one of the complications early in season when you try and mix up your coverage is you'll have these breakdowns, and so like that I think probably played a part in the defense falling apart. I think it's also notable that they only finished with 18 points in the fourth, so they get the offense going, but down the stretch they're just not able to get the buckets. But they had that possession with 3 open looks and couldn't knock it down that would have tied the game. And so like you said, the opportunities were there. They definitely left one on the table. I think it's kind of a cumulative catch up of all of the things that have been problems for them early on in the season, which honestly it's better to catch a loss than to keep on winning and not have to address those issues.
I know you hate the question, but when the Nuggets bench isn't going well, and they were not going well tonight, why not give Porter Jr. a crack at it? Why not give Juancho Hernan-Gomez a crack at it? I understand there's a rotation there, and I understand you don't feel like you need to panic and get away from it, but that seemed like there were opportunities in this game to give those guys a little bit of run.
So we're going to just have to keep going over it. I think at this point, I thought he might get in tonight. I really did. But I think at this point, him not getting in tonight is illustrative of the current situation. And I would say this. MPJ is not going to – the fans think of it as, oh, things are going well. Put in MPJ because he's so talented. And Malone thinks of it as, oh, we're in a tight game. Under no circumstances can I put in MPJ. They could rattle off an 8-0 run, and then we're sunk. The kid has never played against – like top-level NBA competition regular season. He's only been in preseason, and those are the only games he's played in 2 years. So the idea of him being like, oh, things are struggling, if they put in MPJ, it'll fix it, that is never going to be how Malone thinks of it. It's going to have to be a situation where there's no risk. There's a comfortable lead. He can manage it if things go badly, that there's nothing but upside. And until that happens or an injury forces him into the rotation, they're going to, I think, continue to be patient with him. If there was ever a night to get him in, it was this one. At home, on a back-to-back, the guy's tired. Torrey Craig only played 10 minutes. They're down to basically a 9-man rotation. A lot of reason to get him in, and the fact that he didn't, I think, shows, like, whether the fans agree or not, and they're not going to, Michael Malone views him as something to integrate slowly rather than an emergency pull option.
And if the Nuggets are winning and they've won 3 of their first 4, I think people will probably be patient with it, even if they don't like it. But my question is, let's look a little further down the road then. If they're waiting for the perfect landing spot to put in Porter Jr. in blowout games when they're beating somebody, how does Porter Jr. play himself into the rotation? Can you envision what that would look like for Porter to go from where he is to a regular part of the rotation off the bench?
He's got to look better in practice. That's a lot of it. He's got to look like he's mastered the concepts, that he's studied the game plan, that he knows the scouting report. He's got to impress in those non-game situations. In the NBA, it's a little bit different than NFL in that you don't see any of practice. Technically, the last 10 minutes are open, but that's not really true. At the point where they let media in, it's all over except for the shooting.
Right.
Everybody's just doing shooting drills. That's it. So you don't know these things. And oftentimes when the guy doesn't get in or isn't getting minutes, the fans are like, but he looks so good in games, it's because they're not able to see everything else. And I'm not saying there are problems there. I just think that he probably hasn't shown a mastery of the offensive concepts that Malone feels is necessary, or defensive for that matter, to feel comfortable with putting him in. And he may not like the matchups. I do think it's just going to have to be one of those things where the situation is right. Either the situation is going to have to force Malone's hand to put him in, or it's going to have to be so comfortable that he's like, okay, let's see what he can do. And then if he impresses, that'll probably earn him some more because the games do matter more than practice. But these things are pretty complicated in terms of why guys don't wind up playing as much as fans often think they should.
We're talking with our Nuggets insider, Matt Moore. You can follow him on Twitter at Hardwood Paroxysm. And, Matt, I want to go back to something you talked about the night before the Nuggets opener. Jamal Murray needs to worry about wins, not worry about numbers. Stop trying to be the hero. Again, late in this game, he did try to be the hero again, and it felt like it was almost inevitable that he was going to do it no matter what. And it finishes with an ugly air ball 3 that was forced, fadeaway, and completely unnecessary. If you're Michael Malone, how do you continue to teach Jamal Murray that that's the wrong thing to do in that situation?
So my first reaction was to go, well, there goes Murray doing Murray things again. I went back and watched, and a couple things happened on that sequence. One, once they inbound the ball, Murray's supposed to come off of a Jokic screen, and Jokic tells him to go wide, basically to give him some more room for the catch. But Murray goes narrow. He goes closer to the screen, and DFS, Dorian Finney-Smith, is able to get over it really quickly and deny the catch, which freezes that pass and costs them another 3 to 4 seconds. So by the time he catches it, he's already in a spot. He can't go left because if he drives left, he's running into Kristaps Porzingis. He's going to swat him into oblivion. If he goes right, Finney-Smith is overplaying it, and there's probability of a steal. So he winds up going to the step back. There was also no movement on that sequence. Like, it was pretty clearly designed to be, Murray catches, makes a move, draws a defense, maybe kicks to Harris in the corner or tries to finish, or, has Jokic kind of drifting there for a short jumper or underneath. There was a lot of things that went wrong on that play beyond just Murray taking a terrible shot. He was forced into it. However, I do think, I'm not sure he was absolutely aware of the time. And I'm always a fan of going earlier rather than later. You want to make sure you get the last shot, but there's a difference between the two. And with the shot clock differential, I think he messed that up as well. I think it was just like a game time situation as well as problems on the handoff that created that shot. There's also great defense by Dorian Finney-Smith. Murray's had a lot of clutch moments, and he's going to have a lot more. He's also been great at the line. I think the Mavericks played it great. I think they made a series of mistakes, and it wasn't all on Murray in that specific sequence.
Well, on the bright side, you learn more from a loss than a win, and we knew the Nuggets were going to have that kind of situation. So, Matt, we'll get back to you Halloween night. Find out when they play the Pelicans as they head out to the Big Easy. See if they can, I would say, right the ship. Just course correct a little bit. Thanks for the time tonight.
Thanks, man. Take care.
All right, that was our Nuggets insider, Matt Moore. Thanks to Budweiser, the official beer sponsor of the Denver Nuggets. The NFL trade deadline was today. The idea was that Chris Harris might be dealt, might even probably be dealt. He was not dealt. Did the Broncos make the right move? I'll tell you next. The Denver Broncos did not make a move at the trade deadline today. Chris Harris was of a person of interest around the league, specifically among NFC teams. Per Mike Kliss of 9 News, the Lions were the only team that made a firm offer for Chris Harris Jr., but the Broncos didn't like it. They were looking for a minimum of a third-round pick, apparently. Also said the Eagles expressed interest but didn't make a firm offer. The Broncos now hope that they can get third-round compensatory draft pick for Chris Harris in the 2021 draft after he leaves from the season and goes and joins someone else. And that's what's going to happen, by the way. The fact that Kliss is reporting that that's what the Broncos are hoping for indicates that even the Broncos understand that's what's going to happen. Chris Harris is leaving. The trick with compensatory draft picks, though, is the formula can be complicated. Chris Harris needs to sign a big money deal, and the Broncos need to not spend too much money in free agency because compensatory draft picks are not just for the people you lose. It's for the people you lose compared to the people you sign. So the best case scenario for the Broncos is they could get a third-round compensatory pick in the 2021 draft after Chris Harris picks his new team this spring. Was that the right choice? They could have gotten maybe a fourth-round pick in this upcoming draft. Would that have been better? Curious to see what you think. RamosLaw.com text line is 303-713-1043. Doug has been holding. Wanted to talk about the Drew Lock situation, so I want to go to Doug real quick. Thanks for your patience, Doug. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. How are you tonight?
I'm all right.
Hey, really quick about the compensatory pick. I think they did the right thing on keeping him personally. I think he's worth a second. But I'm thinking, there's something that a lot of people are overlooking about Locke, and that is the fact that Elway might be using his head for once and trying to keep the kid from getting gun-shy behind such an offense that's just awful. And hopefully try to build a team around him next year, trying to get an offensive line that he can stay behind so the kid doesn't pick up any bad habits like the Flacco flinch.
How's Kyler Murray's offensive line in Arizona? Is it good? I mean, they were the worst team in the league last year. Is it good? Because they threw him right in there. They didn't seem too worried about him being gun shy. I mean, you go look at all the young. Go ahead, Doug. Sorry.
I was going to say this kid's never been on a field throwing even a pass yet. So I'm a little worried about it. I'm hoping that they don't put him in until the last possible minute, Well, and yeah, you're right. It is a horrid team.
Well, Doug, I appreciate the call, and you look. That has been a very popular theory. That John Elway is I call it the Goldilocks theory for Drew Lock. That they're not going to put Drew Lock behind their offensive line until it's just right. Here's the problem. When was the last time that happened for the Broncos? It was pretty good in the Super Bowl 50 year. But truth be told, it wasn't an elite line, not according to all the numbers. John Elway really hasn't had an elite line since he's been the general manager, and that was 2011. I can give you the wreckage of his draft picks. He didn't make all the selections in 2011. He gets the credit for the Von Miller one. That's okay, but Brian Sanders was there at the time and still doing a lot of that. They picked Orlando Franklin in the second round. Second pick in the second round. Good pick. Good dude. Not bad a radio guy either, by the way. You should check him out between 9 and noon every morning with Sandy Clough. Okay. Pretty good there. 2012. Philip Blake. Fourth round pick. How'd that work out? 2013. Winston Painter. No, not so much. How about 2014? Michael Schofield was your third round pick. Matt Paradis was your second. That turned out to be a great pick. Of course, if they'd have known Matt Paradis was that good, they wouldn't have waited for the sixth to pick him up. So there's a little bit of luck there, too. Schofield, the guy they picked in the third, basically was a bright orange traffic cone with the Denver Broncos. 2015, Tyson Brilo was the second round pick right there. Max Garcia 2015. By the way, this is only 4 seasons ago. As a center, neither one of these guys are on the team. Sombrilo was a disaster. Connor McGovern was picked in the 5th round of 2016. He's a guard, mind you. He's playing center, so I mean, I guess, but he's out of position. And 2017, need I remind you, one Mr. Garrett Bowles. 2018, Sam Jones was selected in the 6th. Didn't make this team. He was picked last year. And Dalton Reisner. Yep, that worked out. So there you go. So out of the picks where you aren't expecting luck to pan out for you, Orlando Franklin in 2011 and Dalton Reisner in 2019. Okay. And in between, a very good offensive line pick in Matt Paradis, of course, who the Broncos chose not to resign. So the idea that John Elway's waiting for top-tier picks and a good offensive line to put Drew Lock behind, well, Elway's picked 2 out of his top picks between 2011 and 2019. The guy in 2011 played his entire career, is retired, and is now on this station as a commentator. So going by that pace, and even if you want to count Connor McGovern and Matt Paradis and hypothetically think, oh, well, Elway knew they were going to be starters and knew they were going to be really good. McGovern is not, by the way, playing out of position, and he's not great there. Paradis was, but he's not on the team. So you're looking at the pace there, 4 of them in 9 drafts, but only 2 are on the team. You're talking about getting a 5-man offensive line that's pretty good, through the draft at least. Well, let's see. Do the math quick. About 2032. Drew Lock's not going to be playing more than likely in 2032. Maybe he will. Who knows? He'd be in his 13th year by then. Could be. Maybe Juwan James can play more than a handful of snaps. I don't know. He was injury prone when they got him. He's injury prone as it stands. He's played a grand total of 32 snaps. He was paid $51 million. There is no perfect situation in which you can put your quarterback. Doesn't exist. When you pick a quarterback high, like the teams in the draft do, among the top, they're bad teams. That's why they get the good quarterbacks in the draft. And you know what they do? They play them. I understand the idea. I think Broncos fans are grasping at straws and saying, well, the line isn't very good. Maybe Elway's playing chess while the rest of everyone's playing checkers. He's playing 2 and 6 chess. That's not really what's going on here. You're trying to find answers for something that makes no sense. Teams don't do that. You have to go ahead and play those guys to find out if he can be your guy. Because if he can't, you have to find another one, especially when you're going to probably have a top 10 pick. Go back to the phone lines. Talk to Derek. How are you, Derek? Derek, you there?
Yeah, brother. How are you?
All right. What's up?
Not much. Just curious, like your thoughts, like when you think of offensive line play versus quarterback play, how many first-round offensive linemen really become Hall of Famers compared to how many first-round quarterbacks become Hall of Famers?
More linemen. The linemen
in the NFL right now.
I don't have the number in front of me, but there's a reason that because of the injury situation, the likelihood of injury, and the fact that it's more projectable. There is no question. Highly picked offensive linemen tend to be more successful on the whole than quarterbacks.
Okay, so just like evaluating the NFL really quick, just I know you're intelligent, so just go top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL and name them, and tell me when they were drafted.
Right off the bat. Well, that's kind of put me on the spot there, but
No, take your time. I get it.
I guess I would look at it, and you'd look at a lot of the quarterbacks right now, and you'd say, when were they selected? You talk about Aaron Rodgers, first round. Drew Brees, the first pick of the second round. I'm going on this by memory. And, of course, everyone goes, but Tom Brady. Well, cool.
No,
that
he's
happens
the only
sometimes. Tom Brady was a sixth. Great. That's cool. He sat behind, by the way, in college, a very, very good quarterback in college in Brian Griese. And that's why he slipped through the cracks. Same thing happened to Terrell Davis as a running back in Georgia who ended up behind Garrison Hurst, and so he didn't play very often. But if you're to look at the quarterbacks of the good teams in the league, they're picked in the early rounds. Jimmy Garoppolo was picked in the second, I believe. The Bills are 5-2. Josh Allen was picked in the first, right? Baltimore Ravens are 5-2. Lamar Jackson in the first. Pittsburgh Steelers are having a bad year because Ben Roethlisberger's hurt. He was picked in the first. Okay? Indianapolis Colts were expected to have a better year when Andrew Luck was before he retired, but he was picked in the first. Deshaun Watson was picked in the first. Patrick Mahomes was picked in the first. That's just the AFC. Carson Wentz was picked in the first. Aaron Rodgers picked in the first. Matt Stafford was picked in the first. Cam Newton is hurt. They still have a winning record, but he's also been an MVP of the league. He was picked in the first. Russell Wilson was picked in the third. Jared Goff was picked in the first. So, I mean, you're getting the patterns.
Yeah.
You want a good
That's
quarterback.
my only
I
argument.
just ran off about half the league there, and they were all first-rounders.
Right. So when I asked you once again just about offensive linemen compared to quarterbacks, and you had said offensive linemen, no doubt, it's obviously quarterbacks, right?
No, it's not. An offensive lineman is a safer pick. It is a more reliable pick. But if you want a great quarterback, the most important position in the NFL, you have to use, the numbers say, and I just rolled it out, you have to use a first-round pick to give you the best chance to get that guy.
Oof.
The Denver Broncos have done it, by the way. That's why they got Paxton Lynch.
Well, no, Paxton Lynch was evaluated as a third-round pick.
That's not where he was
reached on him in
picked.
the first because we didn't want to take Dak Prescott because he missed a flight to Denver.
And you're preaching to the choir there. I sat in the Broncos war room, or team room for the draft, with one of the guys that used to work at the station doing YouTube, saying before that round started, I have a bad feeling Denver's going to try to pursue Paxton Lynch. They should be picking Dak Prescott.
No doubt.
You can check you wouldn't say tape. You can check the YouTube. Still there.
Yep. So, I mean, just looking at it, like when everybody screams about taking the offensive lineman, it's like, well, we saw how well that worked out, taking a first-round offensive lineman on Garrett Bowles. How good has he been?
Well, not very good, but they should have picked Ryan Ramczyk, who I talked about before that draft, too. And I know Ramczyk is now playing right tackle, but wouldn't you rather have an all-pro right tackle than Garrett Bowles at left? I know I would. So the idea, I get where you're going, Derek, and I really appreciate it. You're looking at two different things that are both fair. It's a good call. Here's the way to look at the draft, okay? Think of the draft as a dartboard. You normally get stand a decent distance away from a dartboard, right? You go play in your local pub or whatever. If you're in the first round, you're about one good stride away from the dartboard when you throw it. Maybe you're not going to hit the bullseye every time, but you got a better chance and you'll probably hit it inside the triple ring, right? The second round, take one more step back, throw it. Okay, still not too bad. Third round, take another step back. Now we're about where you normally throw the dart from, and if you're particularly skilled, you have better odds, but you're not always going to hit the bullseye. Take a step back in the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. The seventh, you're doing that one when you were a kid and you were basically making bets and you're throwing with your back against the wall, trying to throw a big old arc and see if you can get it on the board at all. That's how the NFL draft works. Because the nature of the game is that it is easier to learn the tackle position, not easier to execute it. But it's easier to learn it. Guys who are elite tackles in college, especially if they ran a running scheme or a pro-style scheme like Wisconsin does with Ryan Ramczyk, have a very good chance of being successful. Quarterbacks, especially now, with the spread offenses, with the fact that college coaches have been very clever in realizing you can scheme your way around a talent deficiency, means that it's harder than ever to project a quarterback because finding quarterbacks that play a true pro-style offense are few and far between. It is a safer bet to pick a lineman than a quarterback. He is less likely to be a bust. But you can't win without the quarterback. And if you look at where you get the quarterbacks, you get them high in the first round. Broncos, who are going to be picking high in the first round, need to decide if they need one or not. Interesting situation for the Broncos. Brandon Allen is your starter. We're going to talk with Cecil Lammey, who scouted Brandon Allen prior to the draft in 2016, which, not coincidentally, was the last time Brandon Allen threw a pass that counted for anything. We'll see what Cecil thought about the Broncos' new starter next. We will get to Cecil Lammey in a couple minutes. Dig back into the Broncos here and the quarterbacking situation. The Broncos did not make a trade. They stood pat, sticking with Chris Harris. For the Broncos' performance, that's a great thing because you're looking at Duke Dawson and Devontae Harris being your starters. Otherwise, that's a little on the bad side. Supremely inexperienced, a little bit on the bad side. So that's one of the concerns there. I think the Broncos saw that. They're not trying to tank. It's too late to try to tank, quite frankly, for the Broncos when you look at the NFL schedule across the board. And when you look at the standings, you have the Bengals at 0-8, the Dolphins at 0-7, Washington, Atlanta, and the Jets all 1-6. And then you have the Broncos, Giants, Bucks, and Browns all with 2 wins. Broncos or Browns one of them could have 3 wins. They could also tie, I suppose. But they could have 3 wins, find themselves in a weird spot. If the Broncos were to get through, if they were to win and drop Cleveland, the Broncos would be picking, obviously there's a lot of season left, but the Broncos would be picking somewhere between 10 and 16. The league is pretty bunched up here. And I think that's what fooled the Broncos for a while into thinking that they were better than they were and they still had a chance. If the Broncos were just 5-3, if they were even 4-4, they'd be right in the middle of the entire NFL. But there are some really good teams, New England, San Francisco, New Orleans, and the Packers. And some really bad teams, the ones I mentioned earlier. So the Broncos aren't tanking. They can't even try to tank. It's not worth tanking. So they decided to hold on to Chris Harris, see what they get in compensatory draft picks. It's an interesting choice there, but I think it's the right choice. I've been saying for a while I thought the only player they should trade was Sanders. That's what they did. So, interesting there where the Broncos go. And going ahead and going away from him, I think, makes some sense. Sanders moves on. Harris stays. Wolf stays. Everybody else stays. Free agents they have are going to play out the string. And I'm fine with that. We'll talk to Cecil Lammey about Brandon Allen next. Talked a lot about Drew Lock, of course, with Cecil. Gonna talk more about Drew Lock. But first, let's hear from Drew Lock. We'll do that next. So, what is the Denver Broncos' plan for Drew Lock? We don't know. Nobody knows. There are three quarterbacks on this roster. Like I talked with Cecil Lammey last segment, none of them have thrown a a pass in the NFL because none of them have so much as taken a snap. So where does that leave the Broncos? In theory, if you were to have three guys available, rookie second-round pick, rookie undrafted selection, and a former sixth-round pick that's been a journeyman for 3 seasons prior to this, and none of them have any in-game experience, you're thinking the pecking order would be second-round pick, journeyman, undrafted rookie. That would be Locke, Allen, Rippon. Now, I agree with what Cecil and I talked about last segment, and that is that for this week, given that the Broncos didn't know that Flacco was going to suffer this injury, Allen's been the backup all year. He's been healthy. He's been the backup. He should start this game against Cleveland. I don't have a huge problem with Rippon coming off the practice squad to be a backup, but I guess I look at it and think, if he had to play, would he be any better than Drew Lock? Really? He's not better than Drew Lock. So would he play that much better? I don't know. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The interesting spot, of course, is that Drew Lock himself has to think about what's happening to him. He's been healthy, by the way. Could have been activated 2 weeks ago. And he could have been practicing. You've heard Vic Fangio in the commercials that we're running saying, well, he hasn't done anything. He hasn't even practiced or anything. Well, that isn't Drew Lock's fault. That's the Broncos' fault because the Broncos decided not to activate him and have him be practicing. So that's on them. The Broncos have chosen to not have Drew Lock practice. He could have been practicing. And if he had, you'd think he would be ready to at least be the backup and you wouldn't have to make an additional roster move to activate Brett Rippon from the practice squad. So the Broncos messed that up. Do they have a plan? Well, suffice to say it, if they do, well, they may not have informed Drew Lock. Out at Dove Valley today, Drew Lock had a chance to talk to the media. Here's what he said. So Locke is comfortable with that. And that's all well and good. But when you look at the situation that he's facing, it's a weird one. You just don't get picked in that spot without the idea that you might be expected to play, preferably sooner rather than later. But that just hasn't been the case. Want to go to the RamosLaw.com text line, 303-713-1043. Talk to John. John, how are you?
Hey, Sean. Thank you for taking the call.
Of course.
First of all, I got to eat some crow, and I'll gladly do this. Chris Harris didn't get traded to the Eagles or any other team, and I'm thankful. But to move on, to regurgitate, paraphrase, or ride on the coattails of what's been said on your show or other 104.3 The Fan show, with John Elway's mentality and the organizational standpoint or goals, there's just plan A. Like you said, there's no plan B. And I think we're seeing that with this Brandon Allen conundrum and Drew Lock. It's blown up in our faces. Joe Flacco isn't in his prime, way past his prime. But for Elway, I would say this: Brandon Allen, 0 starts. Rippon backing him up, 0 starts. I understand the aspect of not activating Lock as one of your 2 return IR players just to have him practice for Cleveland, and then we have a bye the following week. So I understand one aspect of waiting until after our bye to activate him to the roster. I don't really believe that or advocate for that, but so I understand that. But this quarterback conundrum is just Elway swinging and missing. What do you think? I just think it's just blown up in our face.
Well, yeah, I think, John, you're right. It's clearly blown up in Denver's face, and this has been a challenge. You know, like I said, after the fourth loss of the season to Jacksonville, after that, I've been consistent on one point. The rest of the season, the most achievable goal that's left, and maybe the most important goal that's left, is to find out if Drew Lock can be the guy, the franchise quarterback. Because if he's not, you got to look at getting one. And guess what? They're not available in free agency for the most part. The Broncos had a crack at one of the closest to that possible when Kirk Cousins went on the market 2 years ago. That's about as good a quarterback as ever hits free agency in his prime. He didn't really give the Broncos the time of day. And that's after they had a losing season. The Broncos are now going to be coming off of 3. You have to draft them. It's just that simple. You have to draft them. And so if you have to draft a quarterback in the first round to get a great one, and by and large, you do, it's critical to find out if Drew Lock is the guy. The Broncos can still do that. I've argued forever he should start in Minnesota. More than a month now, I've made that argument. I'm going to stick with it. Flacco's injury doesn't change that, and there's still time for the Broncos to do it. But they've already thrown away practice time that they could have had. And for what? So maybe Theo Riddick can come back and do what? Win them games? To what end? The Broncos messed up. They got too clever. They outthought themselves. They bought into the own idea that they were the smartest guys in the room, and they basically outfoxed themselves. That's what they're dealing with at this point. Now you have 2 quarterbacks that are going to be active. Neither of one has even taken a snap. And your fallback option, if they decide to go to Lock, is another guy who hasn't ever taken a snap. The Broncos went into this season with virtually no depth anywhere, and they also put it at quarterback. A 34-year-old Joe Flacco who has had injuries in the last 2 seasons, couldn't finish last year because of the injury that made him lose his job eventually to Lamar Jackson, who would not give it back. That's the guy you signed, and no veteran backup. Okay, well, if you're going to go young, go young. Get Locke going. This week, fine. That ship sailed. Go with Allen. Go with Rippon. Drew Lock has to start week 11 in Minnesota, regardless of what happens against the atrocious Cleveland Browns. It is that simple. Now that there's clarification from multiple sources on Joe Flacco's injury, should they put him on IR and end his season? If so, when would they do that? I'm not a fortune teller, but I can tell you when they should do both. Next. Joe Flacco is now expected to miss 5 to 6 weeks. That's reports from Ian Rappaport and Jeff Legwold. Due to the herniated disc, that sounds about right. At the moment, surgery is not necessary. Vic Fangio said on Monday that the team was still gathering information. At 34 years old, it makes sense not to risk him. But let's say 6 weeks. That's Cleveland, the bye week, Minnesota, Buffalo, the Chargers, and Houston. That gives him a return potentially of December 15 at Kansas City in 3 of the Broncos' final games. The Broncos, given the fact, and who knows? It's sports, right? The dream is that Brandon Allen is secretly Tom Brady and nobody ever knew it, and so then he's going to surprise everybody. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. A man can dream. But I wouldn't count on it. And the Broncos already 2-6. Even if they go 500 in the next 6 games, in which Flacco conceivably would be out, the best the Broncos could finish is 7-9. They're not making the playoffs. They're not making the playoffs. And Flacco is going to miss the vast majority of the rest of the season. He's under contract for next year. Why risk him? The Broncos were planning on, reportedly, activating Brett Rippon from the practice squad to back up Allen. Cecil Lammey and I talked about it earlier today. I've been saying for 5 weeks now, basically, that Drew Lock should start against the Minnesota Vikings on November 17th. Nothing has changed my opinion there. Nothing. That should be what the Broncos do. To that end, given that Brett Rippon should be the backup for this game, I don't have a problem with it. Now, my problem with the Broncos is they didn't activate Lock earlier, and then they wouldn't need to activate Rippon. That was a mistake, but you can't go back in the past and fix it. Broncos blew that, but it's too late. No time machines here. No DeLorean. No Marty McFly and his sports almanac. Can't fix it. So that being the case, the correct move this week is Allen and Rippon. Following that, the rest of the season, it should be Lock backed up by Allen. You can put Rippon back on the practice squad if you'd like, or I guess you could keep him. But to me, the answer is pretty straightforward. Even if it doesn't need surgery and it needs 6 weeks, you're going to have to promote somebody so they can practice as the backup pretty quick, right? Do it tomorrow. Promote Brett Rippon from the practice squad tomorrow and put Joe Flacco on season-ending IR tomorrow. The season is lost. There is nothing that Joe Flacco can gain out of it. There's nothing that the team can gain out of it except for getting a 34-year-old quarterback hurt, one that you restructured and have on your books for next year. Just call it. Flacco should be put on IR tomorrow after they activate Rippon. After the game against Cleveland, they need to activate Drew Lock immediately and put Rippon back on the practice squad. Yes, that means they have to waive him. If he doesn't play in the game, shouldn't expect there's any problem there. That's what the Broncos should do. There is actual hope. Duke Dawson can play a little bit. Okay? Can. We'll see when he can be back, but they found that Devontae Bosby can play a little bit. Found that Devontae Harris could play a little bit. Found that Alexander Johnson can really play. You might have found a guy there. You might have found your starting inside linebacker. He was on your roster the whole time. Malik Reed can play. Justin Hollins can play. Going to need to find a defensive end, unless you think you can slide Draymond Jones over there permanently. But the Broncos have found some players. Dalton Reisner is terrific. Noah Fant looks like he can play. I don't think he's going to be a bust. I don't know if he's going to be a star yet, but I don't think he's going to be a bust. Doesn't look like it. Remember how bad, we've talked about it before, rookie tight ends usually do. He doesn't look like a bust to me. There's potential. You can see it. The Broncos do have pieces that are young, that are interesting. They should find out about the ones they have at quarterback for the rest of the year. I personally think it's disrespectful to Joe Flacco to say, hey, Joe, sorry about the herniated disc in your neck, which is, pretty dangerous thing to have hit in a football game. But please, hurry back so you can be the quarterback in the last 3 games of our completely lost season. Forget it. Respect the veteran. Respect what he's done. Put him on IR for the end of the year. Let him get healthy. Let him get better. Maybe you cut him after June 1st of next year. Maybe you don't. But there's no reason for Joe Flacco to take another snap for this team in 1919. I don't think there's any reason for him to take another snap at all. But there's certainly no reason to have him take one in 2019. You have to make roster moves anyway if you want to activate Rippon. That's the move. Just commit to it. The season is lost. Let's try out the young guys. Try them out. See what you got. Brandon Allen can move a little bit. He's not a scrambler. He's not a runner, but he can move a little bit. Let's see him. And then let's see the guy you traded up to get, the 4-year starter at an SEC school. The guy that John Elway and company followed around all year long. Believed in him enough to go trade up into the second and get him. And then let's see him. Let's see if he's the guy. If he is the guy, if you can find out if he is the guy, great. Then you can go into that top 10 pick and get yourself an offensive lineman to help him. But if you find out he's not the guy, well, guess what? To be totally honest, you might have picked a good year to need a quarterback. There are a lot of guys available in this draft that are pretty interesting. Start with Tagovailoa, of course. Joe Burrow of LSU has looked so electric that maybe some people are already thinking he might pass Tagovailoa as the number 1 quarterback. Justin Herbert, of course, has been long enamored. Both Kevin Kistner and I really like Jake Fromm of Georgia. Runs a pro-style offense out there. And then you have some interesting guys in Jordan Love from Utah State. Last being witnessed being trampled by 78 Air Force carries last weekend, by the way. Jacob Eason of Washington. I think Jalen Hurts' stock took a pretty bad hit this weekend. Those guys might all be, and they probably would all be, maybe not Hurts, but the other guys could all be potential first-rounders. One of your guys, one of the fixes for the Broncos might be in there. You might be able to get one even if you're picking 9 or 11. That could happen. Got to find out. Let Joe Flacco, who has, I think, been admirable in taking the beating behind this offensive line, let him get healthy. Let him get better. Go that route. That's the way to go. That's the right idea. Move on from Joe Flacco for the 29th season, Broncos, and do it tomorrow. Cold day out here, snowy day out in Colorado. Many school districts already closed for tomorrow. Lucky kids. Although, by the way, you better not be up listening to this. Go back to bed. You can listen to it on the podcast tomorrow at your convenience, because we keep it PG rated up in here. So just go to the website or go to the app, and then you can listen to it on the podcast tomorrow. But kids, go to bed. Even though you have school tomorrow, go to bed. But the cold weather makes you think about the Colorado Avalanche, who have a game tomorrow. They will be missing a very, very significant player. I'll tell you who and why next. The Colorado Avalanche have lost their captain to injury. Gabe Landeskog is out indefinitely with a lower body injury. Mikko Rantanen last week, of course, week to week with a lower body injury last week. Landeskog has 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points in 11 games. Nathan MacKinnon is the center point of that line. Arguably the best scoring line in hockey. It was last year, and it would look like it this year. And now MacKinnon is missing Landeskog and Rantanen, both of his wingers, indefinitely. It wasn't even clear when Landeskog was necessarily injured. It's obviously a concern. Tomorrow, they will host the Florida Panthers. See how Jared Bednar shuffles those lines. JT Compher moved up to the first line to take the spot for Rantanen, but now it's hard not to shuffle some lines around, with Landeskog being unavailable as well. Fortunately, every time you hear it's early in the season, baseball teams love doing that. It's early in the season. Okay, here's why they count, though. The Avs have 17 points. They have the top spot in the Western Conference, tied with 17 points, but they have a game in hand over the Nashville Predators and 2 games in hand over the Edmonton Oilers, who lead the Pacific, also with 17 points. So the Avs are in great shape because of their outstanding start. That's big. That's why all those games count just the same. And that's why you need them. That's why you need to take them seriously. The Avs lost their last outing to the Anaheim Ducks 5-2, probably their worst performance of the young season. This will be interesting to see what the Avs do. We'll have our Avs insider Adrian Dater join us following the game tomorrow. Talk about what the Avs do to replace Landeskog, how long the injury will affect him, and what that means. For the Avs, the bright side is, unless it is very, very serious, they've put in the work. And it means they don't have to panic. The last couple of years, the Avs have had to really get it cranking post-All-Star break to make a move. This year, they came out of the gate hot. They came out of the gate the way you would hope them to come out of the gate. And that's why they look like a true contender, even with both wingers injured and knocked off, arguably the best scoring line in the NHL. So bad news for the Avalanche, obviously. Never good news to lose any player, let alone your team captain and a guy like Gabriel Landeskog. But the Avalanche have put in the work, and that means that it's likely to pay off. So very, very good news for them regarding their record. Now, if they can just find a way to keep it going, they may be able to weather that storm. We'll talk to Adrian Dater about it tomorrow. Over on the RamosLaw.com text line, 303-713-1043. A lot of activity. Specifically about what to do with the draft and what to do with Drew Lock. I would say that if a text line is the pulse of Broncos country, most people don't have any issue with Drew Lock not playing this week. And I don't either. I think he should have been the backup this week, so I think the Broncos should have been practicing him and activated him. But I don't think he should play this week. But there is a lot of ideas that the offensive line isn't good enough, what I call the Goldilocks take. You have to put him behind the good offensive line. Well, it's not how it goes. It's not how it goes for any team, by the way. Any team at all. You go look at the top quarterbacks. You go look at the starting quarterbacks, and when they started, they didn't start after the team was perfectly made for them. It's an interesting position. I get why people feel that way, but I don't think it's realistic. From the 913, I would like to agree with an earlier take on the show in regard to NFL draft. The OT is safer percentage of success than quarterback in the first round, considering Flacco's restructure and Locke being held back this season. So the idea behind that is that The Broncos do have the answer at quarterback, so go after the offensive line. Or at least they have enough of it. This is where it gets tricky, Broncos country, and I guess I'd ask you that. Look, Joe Flacco's in a nice career. Seems like a nice guy. I have no beef. None. I think he actually got shortchanged for his career, quite frankly. Everyone complained about, is he elite after they won the Super Bowl, knocked the Broncos out earlier on that run. I don't know if he's elite, but I know he's been good. I know he's had a really good career. But he is way closer to the end than the beginning. And I'm not sure he can be significantly better than average at the NFL level anymore. So he's not the answer. And let's say Drew Lock isn't the answer, and the Broncos don't activate him and don't find out until 2020. So if Flacco ends up being basically done, or Lock wins the job, but Lock isn't any better than, say, Brock Osweiler, you're looking at what? Maybe they go 7-9 in 2020? You okay with that? I understand they won the Super Bowl in 2015, and they deserve a honeymoon for that. But are you okay, Broncos country, with 4 losing seasons in a row? That hasn't happened since the AFL days. I'm going to bet a tremendous number of you weren't born. I wasn't. And I'm a lot older than Kevin in the booth. I wasn't even born last time they had 4 seasons. Are you okay with that? Especially when you could potentially mitigate that risk by playing Drew Lock and finding out what he can be. I understand he doesn't get to have a great offensive line. Kyler Murray does not have a great offensive line because he plays for the team that was the worst in the NFL last year. Okay? Do you know what record the Arizona Cardinals are right now? They're 3-4-1. They were the worst team in the league. They're 3-4-1. They picked Kyler Murray, and they played him immediately on a team that was otherwise the worst in the NFL, and they have a better record than the Broncos. Waiting for the perfect situation doesn't work. I've quoted it before. I'll probably quote it again. General George Patton used to say that a good plan executed today is better than the perfect plan executed next week. The NFL, the reason they joke about it, right? Not for long. You don't plan 3, 4, 5 years out. John Elway, for all the things that frustrate Broncos country and me sometimes as well, as a GM, John Elway does know one thing. The NFL is a built-to-win-now league. Not 3 years from now, not 5 years from now, now. Now, you're not always going to get to do it. And that's where I think Elway has had some challenges. He's had some challenges, I think, taking the hard look in the mirror and going, you know what? This team really isn't very good. I have to alter my strategy. We thought we did some right things, didn't work out. But he understands it's a win-now league. If they don't find out what Drew Lock is, there's a very good chance you're looking at another season just like this next year. You want that? I know I don't. Food for thought. We'll be back tomorrow after, that's right, Game 7 of the World Series. I love Game 7s. Love it. It's going to be terrific. We'll have it right here. Kevin Kistner in the booth. My name's Sean Drotar. You can follow me on Twitter at sdrotar, S-D-R-O-T-A-R. Thanks to Cecil Lammy for joining us. It's baseball tomorrow. Snowing out here, but it's baseball out there. We'll be back tomorrow night. After that, on Sports Radio 104.3 The Fan.